She'd go to prison for throwing someone off a cliff.
Estella is not born to become a villain. She is born different, stubborn, creative, and impossible to control. From the very beginning, her life is filled with rejection, loss, and a personality that seems to have two completely different sides. One side of her wants to survive by being clever and fearless, while the other is darker, more aggressive, and willing to break every rule standing in her way. Years later, that conflict will create one of Disney's most unforgettable fashion villains, Cruella de Vil. Released in 2021, Cruella is a crime comedy drama directed by Craig Gillespie and stars Emma Stone as Estella/Cruella, Emma Thompson as the powerful Baroness von Hellman, and Joel Fry as Jasper. The movie takes place in 1970s London and tells the origin story of how a talented young woman transforms herself into the infamous Cruella. Instead of presenting her simply as an evil character, the film explores her childhood, ambitions, friendships, rivalries, and the shocking secrets surrounding her mother. The story begins with Estella as a young girl who already stands out from everyone around her. Her hair is naturally divided into two striking colors, black and white, and her personality is just as unusual. She is intelligent and creative, but she has a rebellious side that frequently gets her into trouble. Her mother, Catherine, understands that her daughter is different, but she also knows that Estella's temper could make life difficult for them. Because of this, Catherine constantly encourages her to control her darker side and behave carefully around other people. Estella eventually attends school, where she immediately becomes a target because of her unusual appearance and aggressive personality. She refuses to tolerate bullying, and instead of quietly accepting humiliation, she fights back. Her behavior causes serious problems, and Catherine decides that they need to leave their current life behind. She takes Estella to London, hoping they can start again and build a better future. Before leaving, Catherine visits an enormous mansion belonging to a wealthy and powerful woman known as the Baroness. Catherine desperately needs financial help, but she also carries a secret that Estella knows nothing about. During their visit, Estella sees the Baroness and becomes fascinated by the world of luxury, fashion, and power surrounding her. But the visit ends in tragedy. Catherine is thrown from a cliff and dies after being attacked by three vicious Dalmatians belonging to the Baroness. Estella watches the disaster from a distance and believes that her own actions indirectly caused her mother's death. She is devastated. In the middle of her grief, she runs away to London, carrying nothing but the memories of her mother and the necklace Catherine gave her. London becomes Estella's new home, but survival is difficult. Alone and desperate, she eventually meets two young thieves, Jasper and Horace, along with their dogs. Instead of abandoning her, they allow Estella to join them. The three children grow up together, stealing whatever they need to survive. Jasper becomes the calm and practical one. Horace provides humor and experience, while Estella develops into the mastermind behind their schemes. Years pass, and Estella's natural talent for fashion becomes impossible to ignore. She dreams of working in the fashion industry, but her criminal background and lack of connections make it difficult to enter the world she admires. Still, Estella refuses to give up. She uses her intelligence to create opportunities for herself, eventually getting a job at a prestigious department store. At first, the job seems disappointing. Estella is hired to clean rather than design, and nobody recognizes her talent. But everything changes when she notices the Baroness designs displayed in the store. Estella immediately understands that the Baroness is the woman who unknowingly changed her life years earlier. She begins watching the Baroness carefully and realizes that the woman has enormous influence over London fashion. The Baroness is confident, ruthless, demanding, and obsessed with control. She expects absolute loyalty from everyone around her and destroys anyone who threatens her position. Estella eventually manages to get the Baroness' attention. Impressed by her creativity and fearless attitude, the Baroness offers her a position within her fashion empire. For Estella, this is the opportunity she has been waiting for. She enters the Baroness' world and begins learning everything she can about fashion, business, influence, and manipulation. But Estella soon discovers something disturbing. The Baroness is not simply a powerful fashion designer. She may be connected to the greatest tragedy of Estella's childhood. And when Estella discovers the truth about her mother's death, the woman who once tried to control her own darker nature begins to disappear. A new identity starts to emerge. Cruella. If you enjoy movie explanations like this, follow the channel, like the video, and comment your thoughts as we continue through Estella's transformation into one of cinema's most iconic villains. Estella has finally entered the world she always dreamed about. But working for the Baroness quickly teaches her that talent alone is not enough to survive at the top. The Baroness expects perfection, obedience, and complete loyalty. She does not care about people's feelings, and she has no problem humiliating employees who fail to meet her expectations. Estella understands that this woman is extremely dangerous, but instead of being frightened, she becomes more determined to prove that she can stand against her. At first, Estella tries to impress the Baroness by using her natural creativity. She begins creating designs that are bold, unusual, and completely different from the conservative fashion dominating the Baroness's company. The Baroness recognizes Estella's potential, but she also notices something else. The young designer has a rebellious personality that cannot easily be controlled. Estella is willing to challenge ideas, question decisions, and take risks. That makes her useful, but it also makes her a threat. Meanwhile, Jasper and Horace continue working with Estella, helping her with the schemes that take place outside the fashion world. Jasper especially notices that Estella is changing. The girl he once knew as a loyal friend is becoming more ambitious and secretive. She spends more time around the Baroness and becomes obsessed with discovering the truth about her past. Estella begins investigating the strange circumstances surrounding her mother's death. She remembers the night clearly. Catherine had taken her to the Baroness' estate, and during the visit the Baroness' Dalmatians caused the accident that killed her. For years Estella believed it was simply a terrible coincidence. But now that she is close to the Baroness, she starts noticing details that make the tragedy seem less accidental. One evening, Estella sees the same 3 Dalmatians that were present on the night her mother died. The sight immediately brings back painful memories. Her anger becomes stronger than ever. She realizes that if she wants answers, she cannot simply remain an employee working quietly inside the Baroness's organization. She needs to become someone the Baroness cannot ignore. That is when Estella creates her alter ego. She becomes Cruella. Unlike Estella, who has spent years trying to behave properly, Cruella embraces chaos. She dresses in dramatic black and white outfits, appears without warning at fashion events, and deliberately challenges the Baroness's authority. Her goal is not simply to become famous. She wants to get inside the Baroness's head and destroy the perfect image that the powerful designer has built for herself. Cruella's first public appearance immediately creates a sensation. She arrives at one of the Baroness's major events wearing a spectacular outfit that steals attention from the entire collection. Instead of quietly presenting herself as another designer, Cruella turns the event into a performance. Cameras follow her, reporters talk about her, and London's fashion world suddenly has a new mystery to discuss. The Baroness is furious. She cannot understand who this unknown woman is, or why she keeps appearing at her events. More importantly, she hates the fact that Cruella is receiving attention without asking for permission. The Baroness has spent years controlling London's fashion scene, and now someone is deliberately challenging her. Cruella continues her attacks. Every time the Baroness prepares an important fashion event, Cruella finds a way to disrupt it. She steals attention, creates outrageous designs, and turns public events into opportunities to embarrass her rival. Jasper and Horace help her execute these plans, although they increasingly worry about how far she is willing to go. Estella's transformation also affects her relationship with Jasper. He remembers the kind-hearted girl who once became part of their little family. But Cruella is becoming colder and more demanding. She expects Jasper and Horace to follow her plans exactly, and she becomes increasingly focused on winning her war against the Baroness. At the same time, Estella's relationship with the Baroness becomes more complicated. The Baroness starts relying on Estella's abilities, unaware that the talented employee working beside her is secretly the mysterious woman attacking her reputation. Estella uses this position to gather information. She watches the Baroness's behavior, studies her personal belongings, and searches for clues about Catherine. Eventually, she discovers something that changes everything. The Baroness possesses a necklace that once belonged to Estella's mother. Estella immediately recognizes it. The necklace is not just a valuable piece of jewelry. It is connected to Estella's birth and her family's hidden history. The discovery convinces her that Catherine had some kind of connection to the Baroness long before Estella ever knew about the woman. But there is an even bigger secret waiting to be uncovered. Estella learns that Catherine once worked for the Baroness. She wasn't simply a random woman who visited the mansion years earlier. She had been part of the Baroness's world and knew things about her that could potentially destroy her reputation. The discovery makes Estella question everything she believed about her childhood. Why did Catherine hide her connection to the Baroness? Why did the Baroness have the necklace? And why did those Dalmatians attack Catherine? As Estella searches for answers, she realizes that her mother may have been protecting her from a truth far more dangerous than she ever imagined. And now that truth is getting closer. Meanwhile, Cruella's attacks become more aggressive. The rivalry between the two women is no longer simply about fashion. It has become deeply personal. The Baroness wants to discover Cruella's identity. Cruella wants to uncover the Baroness's secret, and neither woman realizes just how closely their lives are connected. Estella's discovery of the necklace completely changes the way she sees her past. For years she believed her mother, Catherine, was simply an ordinary woman who struggled to raise her alone. Now she realizes that Catherine had a connection to the Baroness, and that connection may explain why her mother was so afraid of powerful people. The necklace becomes the strongest clue Estella has ever found, and she becomes determined to learn where it came from. Instead of confronting the Baroness immediately, she decides to continue playing the role of the loyal employee while secretly investigating everything she can. The more she learns about the Baroness, the more she realizes that this woman has spent her entire life controlling people and destroying anyone who gets in her way. At the same time, Cruella's reputation continues to grow across London. Her wild fashion statements become impossible for the public to ignore, and newspapers begin treating her as the biggest new name in the fashion world. The Baroness becomes increasingly furious because Cruella is taking attention away from her upcoming collection. She knows that whoever this mysterious woman is, she understands fashion extremely well and is deliberately attacking her. Cruella takes advantage of the situation by creating increasingly outrageous appearances, turning every public confrontation into another opportunity to embarrass the Baroness. Jasper and Horace help her with the complicated plans, while Artie, a talented and eccentric shop owner, becomes another important ally. However, Jasper begins noticing that Cruella is becoming obsessed with revenge, and he worries that the woman she is becoming may eventually destroy the friendship they have shared since childhood. Cruella's confidence grows even stronger when she realizes that she can defeat the Baroness by fighting her on her own battlefield. She does not try to copy the Baroness's style. Instead, she creates fashion that represents rebellion, freedom, and chaos. During one major event, Cruella arrives wearing a spectacular outfit that completely steals the spotlight. The Baroness expects the night to establish her dominance over London fashion, but Cruella transforms it into another public humiliation. The crowd is fascinated by her, photographers chase her, and the Baroness is left furious. Every victory makes Cruella more confident, but it also pushes her further away from Estella's original personality. She begins enjoying the power that comes from frightening and humiliating her enemy, and revenge starts becoming more important than anything else in her life. While investigating the necklace, Estella finally discovers the shocking truth about her birth. She learns that Catherine had actually worked for the Baroness and that the Baroness was connected to Estella in a way nobody had ever told her. The truth is almost impossible for her to accept. Estella discovers that she is not simply the daughter of Catherine. She is actually the biological daughter of the Baroness. Catherine had taken Estella away because the Baroness was incapable of loving her and saw her own child as a threat to her position. The revelation explains why Catherine kept the truth hidden and why the necklace had been so important. Suddenly, Estella realizes that the woman she has been fighting all this time is not just her enemy. She is the person who gave her life and then abandoned her. But the revelation does not make Estella forgive the Baroness. Instead, it makes her anger even stronger. She begins thinking about everything that happened to Catherine and realizes that her mother died because she was connected to the Baroness's dark past. The Baroness had spent years believing she could control everyone around her, but now her own daughter has returned to challenge her. Estella decides that she will no longer hide behind her old identity. She fully embraces Cruella, turning herself into the woman the Baroness fears most. However, Cruella does not yet understand that the Baroness has her own suspicions, and the closer the two women get to the truth, the more dangerous their battle becomes. What began as a fashion rivalry is now a personal war between a mother and daughter who are both determined to destroy each other. After discovering that the Baroness is her biological mother, Estella feels as if everything she believed about her life has been turned upside down. Catherine, the woman she loved and remembered as her mother, had protected her from the truth for years, while the Baroness had continued living as though Estella had never existed. Instead of feeling relieved to finally know where she came from, Estella becomes even more determined to destroy the woman responsible for so much pain. She realizes that the Baroness did not simply abandon her, she also created the circumstances that led to Catherine's death. For Estella, this is no longer about becoming the most successful designer in London. It is about making the Baroness experience the same fear and helplessness that she has felt for years. Cruella begins planning her most ambitious attack yet. She knows that defeating the Baroness through fashion alone will never be enough, because the Baroness has money, influence, employees, and powerful connections. Cruella therefore decides to attack her reputation and confidence from every direction. She creates a series of dramatic appearances that make the public question the Baroness's position as London's leading fashion designer. Each appearance is carefully planned, and Cruella uses Jasper, Horace, Artie, and their dogs to help execute her increasingly complicated schemes. The Baroness becomes obsessed with discovering Cruella's identity, while Cruella enjoys watching her enemy lose control. Meanwhile, the relationship between Cruella and Jasper begins to deteriorate. Jasper has always supported Estella even when she was difficult, but he starts to feel that Cruella is no longer the same person he grew up with. She becomes impatient, arrogant, and completely focused on revenge. She starts treating Jasper and Horace less like friends and more like people who work for her. Jasper warns her that she is going too far, but Cruella refuses to listen. She believes that anyone who stands in her way is helping the Baroness, even when that person is someone who genuinely cares about her. Her transformation is becoming more complete, but with every step toward Cruella, she loses another piece of the Estella that Jasper once knew. The Baroness eventually begins connecting the clues and realizes that Estella may be involved. She notices similarities between Estella's appearance, personality, and the mysterious Cruella. More importantly, she begins remembering Catherine and the events surrounding the birth of her daughter. The possibility that Estella survived becomes increasingly difficult for her to ignore. Instead of confronting Estella immediately, however, the Baroness starts watching her carefully. She wants to know whether Estella truly is the woman behind the attacks and whether she possesses the necklace that could expose the truth about their connection. Estella is unaware of just how close the Baroness is to discovering her secret. She continues working inside the Baroness's company while secretly preparing another attack. During this period, she discovers more information about her mother and the night of Catherine's death. She learns that Catherine had gone to the Baroness because she desperately needed help, but the Baroness treated her with cruelty. When Catherine attempted to protect Estella, the situation became dangerous. The three Dalmatians chased Catherine, causing her to fall from the cliff. Estella had always believed that her own actions caused her mother's death, but now she understands that the Baroness's actions were at the center of the tragedy. Cruella decides to use the Baroness's biggest public event as the stage for her ultimate revenge. She wants to destroy the Baroness in front of London's entire fashion community. The event is supposed to be a celebration of the Baroness's latest collection, but Cruella turns it into a nightmare. Her presence creates chaos, and the audience becomes more interested in the mysterious rival than the official show. The Baroness becomes furious as she realizes that Cruella has once again stolen the spotlight. For the first time, the woman who has controlled London's fashion world for decades begins to look powerless. But Cruella's victory comes with a price. Jasper and Horace are arrested after one of her schemes goes too far, leaving Cruella more isolated than ever. Instead of admitting that she has endangered the people closest to her, she becomes even more determined to finish the battle alone. She convinces herself that revenge is more important than friendship, and that anyone who gets hurt along the way is simply part of the price of winning. This is the moment when Estella's darker side takes almost complete control. The Baroness finally confronts Estella and reveals that she knows the truth. She tells Estella that she is her daughter but refuses to show any genuine emotion or regret. Instead, she treats the revelation as another weapon in their psychological battle. Estella realizes that the Baroness has not changed at all. She is still the same ruthless woman who believes everyone exists for her benefit. Estella leaves the confrontation knowing that the final battle is coming, but she does not yet realize that the Baroness has prepared a plan of her own. The Baroness decides that if she cannot control Cruella, she will destroy her. She uses her influence to make Cruella appear dangerous and unstable, turning the public against her. Cruella understands that the Baroness is trying to take away the one thing she has gained, her identity and reputation. Instead of surrendering, she prepares for the final confrontation. She knows that the Baroness believes she has complete control over the situation, but Cruella has one last secret plan that could change everything. Cruella now understands that the Baroness is not going to stop until she is completely destroyed. The two women have reached a point where there is no possibility of reconciliation, and Cruella decides that she must make the Baroness believe she has won before revealing her final plan. While the Baroness uses her influence to convince London that Cruella is nothing more than a dangerous criminal, Cruella quietly prepares a trap that involves everyone she trusts. Jasper and Horace are still in prison, Artie remains one of her few allies, and the dogs continue helping her move around the city. Even though Cruella appears to be losing control, she is secretly putting the final pieces of her revenge into place. The Baroness becomes increasingly confident after seeing Cruella's reputation collapse. She believes she has finally defeated the mysterious woman who challenged her position in the fashion world. But Cruella knows that the Baroness's greatest weakness is her enormous ego. She understands that the Baroness cannot resist showing everyone that she is the most powerful person in the room. Cruella therefore decides to challenge her one final time by creating a situation where the Baroness will be forced to reveal her true nature in front of witnesses. Instead of attacking her directly, Cruella begins manipulating the Baroness into making decisions that will eventually expose her own cruelty. At the same time, Cruella's relationship with Jasper and Horace reaches its lowest point. They have spent their entire lives protecting Estella, but they no longer recognize the person she has become. Jasper especially feels betrayed because Cruella repeatedly puts them in danger without considering the consequences. Their disagreement becomes so serious that Cruella loses the support of the people who have always stood beside her. For the first time, she is completely alone in her fight. Yet rather than stepping back and realizing how much she has changed, Cruella convinces herself that she does not need anyone. She believes that becoming Cruella means leaving Estella's softer side behind forever. The final confrontation begins when Cruella returns to the Baroness's estate. The Baroness has arranged everything carefully, believing that she finally has Cruella trapped. She knows the truth about Estella's identity and intends to use it against her. But Cruella has already prepared for this moment. She arrives wearing one of her most dramatic creations, making it clear that she is no longer hiding from the Baroness. The two women confront each other, and their conversation becomes more than an argument about fashion or revenge. It becomes a battle over identity, family, and the past. Cruella tells the Baroness that she knows what happened to Catherine. She knows about the necklace, the secrets surrounding her birth, and the events that led to her mother's death. The Baroness refuses to accept responsibility. Instead, she tries to manipulate Estella emotionally, insisting that Catherine was nothing compared to her, and that Estella inherited her talent and ambition from her. For a moment, Estella is forced to confront the frightening possibility that she may actually be more like the Baroness than she wants to admit. But she refuses to let her biological connection determine who she becomes. Then Cruella reveals her most important secret. She has discovered that the Baroness is not simply her biological mother, she also possesses information that could completely destroy the Baroness's reputation. The Baroness realizes that Cruella has been planning this confrontation for much longer than she thought. Her confidence begins to disappear, and her anger takes control. She becomes desperate to silence Cruella before anyone else can learn the truth. The situation suddenly becomes violent, and the Baroness makes a decision that reveals exactly who she is. Instead of accepting defeat, she tries to kill Cruella in the same way Catherine died years earlier. She pushes Cruella from the same cliff, making everyone believe that she has finally eliminated her enemy. The Baroness then returns to the mansion, convinced that she has protected her secret. But what she does not know is that Cruella has planned for this possibility. The people around Cruella are shocked when they believe she has died. Jasper, Horace, and the others are left devastated, thinking that their friend is gone. But the truth is very different. Cruella had prepared a strategy that would allow her to survive and expose the Baroness's actions. The mysterious necklace and the evidence connected to her birth become the key to proving the truth. The Baroness thinks she has won, but she has actually walked directly into Cruella's final trap. As the truth begins to emerge, Cruella's transformation reaches its final stage. Estella, the frightened little girl who once blamed herself for her mother's death, is finally gone. In her place stands Cruella, a woman who has accepted every part of herself, her intelligence, her ambition, her anger, and her darkness. But unlike the Baroness, Cruella now has a choice. She can use her power to become exactly like the woman who destroyed her childhood, or she can create her own identity. The Baroness still believes that Cruella's story has ended, but she has no idea that the biggest surprise is still waiting for her. The final move will not simply expose the Baroness's crimes. It will completely change the future of Cruella, Jasper, Horace, and everyone who has been caught in their war. The Baroness believes that Cruella is dead, but her confidence quickly turns into confusion when the people around her begin behaving strangely. She has spent years controlling everyone through fear, money, and influence, so she cannot imagine that anyone could challenge her after what happened at the cliff. Meanwhile, Cruella's allies are secretly carrying out the plan she prepared before the confrontation. Jasper and Horace discover that her apparent death was part of a larger strategy, and although they are angry about the risks she took, they realize that Cruella has finally found a way to expose the Baroness without giving her another opportunity to escape. Cruella returns to the Baroness's estate at exactly the right moment, but this time she is no longer trying to hide her identity. She arrives dressed in a completely different style, showing that she has accepted the name Cruella permanently. The Baroness is shocked to see her alive and immediately realizes that she has been manipulated. Cruella explains that she knew the Baroness would eventually try to eliminate her, so she prepared everything in advance. The Baroness's greatest mistake was believing that Cruella would fight her using the same rules she used against everyone else. Cruella had created an entirely different game, where the Baroness's own actions would become evidence against her. The people gathered at the estate begin to realize that something is wrong. Cruella has arranged for the truth about her past to become public, and the Baroness can no longer control the story. The revelation about Estella's birth and Catherine's connection to the Baroness begins spreading, exposing secrets that the Baroness has kept hidden for decades. Her carefully constructed image of perfection starts collapsing in front of everyone. For a woman who has always demanded admiration, watching people question her becomes almost unbearable. She tries to regain control, but every attempt only makes her appear more desperate. Cruella then makes it clear that she does not want the Baroness's approval. She spent years wondering why her mother had abandoned her and whether there was something wrong with her, but now she understands that the problem was never Estella. The Baroness was simply incapable of loving anyone without trying to control them. Catherine had protected Estella because she knew exactly what the Baroness was capable of, and that sacrifice had allowed Estella to grow up with people who genuinely cared about her. Cruella finally understands that family is not determined by blood alone. Jasper, Horace, Artie, and the others became her real family because they accepted her when she had nothing. The Baroness refuses to accept defeat and tries one final time to manipulate Estella. She argues that Cruella is simply another version of herself and that their ambition makes them the same. Cruella rejects this idea completely. She admits that she has become ruthless and that revenge has changed her, but she refuses to let the Baroness define who she is. The difference between them is that Cruella has people she loves, while the Baroness has spent her entire life destroying relationships whenever they threatened her power. The confrontation reaches its climax when the Baroness realizes that she has lost everything. Her reputation is damaged, her secrets are exposed, and the people who once feared her no longer see her as untouchable. She becomes furious and tries to attack Cruella, but this time Cruella is prepared. She knows exactly how the Baroness will react because she has spent months studying her behavior. The Baroness's own anger becomes the final evidence that proves Cruella's accusations are true. After the confrontation, Cruella finally has the opportunity to walk away from the past. She could disappear and start a completely new life, but instead she chooses to take control of her future. She returns to the fashion world not as Estella, the obedient assistant who once worked under the Baroness, but as Cruella, an independent designer with her own identity and vision. Her style becomes more daring than ever, and London begins recognizing her as a powerful new force in fashion. Jasper and Horace eventually reunite with Cruella, although their relationship is not immediately the same. They make it clear that they are still angry about everything she put them through, but they also know that their friendship is stronger than one terrible period of their lives. Cruella realizes that she cannot build her future by treating everyone around her as disposable. For the first time, she begins understanding that power means very little if there is nobody left to share it with. Cruella then looks toward the future, knowing that the woman she once was will never completely disappear. Estella and Cruella have become two sides of the same person. Estella represents the girl who wanted love and acceptance, while Cruella represents the woman who refuses to be controlled. Instead of choosing one identity and destroying the other, Cruella decides to live with both. Her past has made her stronger, but it does not have to determine every decision she makes. The battle with the Baroness may be over, but Cruella's story is only beginning. She now has the freedom, confidence, and resources to build an empire of her own. Yet hidden beneath her victory is another connection to the future that will eventually explain why her name becomes associated with another famous story involving a pair of Dalmatians. With the Baroness finally defeated, Cruella begins building the future she always wanted. But her victory does not mean that everything suddenly becomes perfect. She has won the battle against the woman who destroyed her childhood, yet she also knows that becoming Cruella has changed her permanently. London now sees her as a mysterious and fearless fashion icon, while the people closest to her are still trying to understand the person she has become. Cruella decides that she will no longer live under anyone else's shadow. She takes control of the fashion business and transforms the old space into something that represents her own personality, filling it with bold designs, dramatic colors, unusual ideas, and the same rebellious energy that made her famous. Jasper and Horace return to her side, although their friendship is not exactly the same as it was before. Cruella finally understands that she had pushed them too far during her obsession with revenge. She had treated Jasper and Horace as tools instead of friends, expecting them to follow every dangerous plan without questioning her decisions. Now that the immediate danger is gone, she begins repairing that relationship. Jasper remains cautious because he knows Cruella can still be unpredictable, but he also knows that beneath the confidence and attitude is the same girl he once protected on the streets of London. Their partnership slowly becomes strong again, and Cruella realizes that having people she trusts is one of the most valuable things she has. Artie also becomes an important part of Cruella's new world. His unique personality and understanding of fashion make him a perfect match for her vision. Together, they create a world where creativity matters more than traditional roles. Cruella is no longer interested in proving herself to the Baroness or anyone else. She wants to create designs that make people stop, stare, and remember her name. Her approach is completely different from the Baroness' controlled and polished style. Cruella wants fashion to feel dangerous, exciting, and unpredictable, just like her own personality. While Cruella celebrates her success, the story also reveals what happens to the Baroness after her downfall. She is arrested and sent to prison for her crimes, finally losing the freedom and influence she spent decades protecting. For the first time, she is forced to live without control over everyone around her. She can no longer intimidate employees, manipulate people, or use her wealth to erase consequences. Her downfall becomes one of the greatest victories of Cruella's life, because the woman who once seemed untouchable is finally being held responsible for what she did. Cruella, however, does not simply forget everything that happened. She continues thinking about Catherine and the life her mother could have had if the Baroness had never entered it. Catherine's memory remains one of the strongest influences on Cruella, even though Cruella's personality has become much darker. She begins to understand why Catherine wanted her to control her temper and stay away from dangerous people. Catherine knew that the world could be cruel, but she also wanted Estella to remain kind enough to survive without becoming cruel herself. Cruella realizes that her mother was not trying to suppress her talent. She was trying to protect her heart. As time passes, Cruella's fashion empire becomes more successful. She is no longer an unknown designer fighting for attention. Her name becomes associated with boldness, rebellion, and originality. People who once laughed at her now want to work with her, and those who once ignored her are desperate to be connected to her success. But Cruella never forgets how quickly power can disappear. She has seen what happened to the Baroness, so she understands that becoming successful is only the beginning. If she wants to remain at the top, she must continue creating something nobody else can imitate. Then the story reveals an important connection to the future. Cruella sends two puppies to the Baroness' former mansion, and these dogs are not ordinary. They are the same type of Dalmatians connected to the tragedy that changed Estella's childhood. Their presence suggests that Cruella's fascination with the breed has not disappeared. Instead, it has become another strength piece of her complicated personality. She does not yet resemble the villain people will eventually know from the classic story, but the connection is becoming clearer. Cruella's world also expands beyond fashion. She becomes fascinated by the idea of creating a public identity so powerful that people cannot separate the person from the legend. She understands that Estella was always trying to fit into a world that did not accept her, while Cruella is now creating a world that revolves around her. That difference gives her confidence, but it also raises an important question. How much of Cruella is performance, and how much is the real woman underneath? By the end of this stage of her journey, Cruella has achieved almost everything she once dreamed of. She has freedom, success, loyal friends, and the ability to design her own future. But she also carries the darkness created by years of pain, rejection, and revenge. She has defeated the woman who caused her suffering. Yet the experience has taught her that power can change a person. Cruella is now free to become whoever she wants, and that freedom is both her greatest strength and her greatest danger. Her story does not end with the fall of the Baroness. Instead, it opens the door to the legend of the woman Cruella will eventually become. Cruella's new life in London looks completely different from the one she had before. She is no longer struggling to survive on the streets or working under someone who refused to recognize her talent. She now has the freedom to build her own fashion empire, and every decision she makes reflects the personality she has developed over the years. Her designs become more daring, her public appearances become more dramatic, and her name becomes impossible to ignore. The people who once considered her strange now see her as someone powerful and influential, but Cruella knows that her success came from refusing to follow the rules that everyone else accepted. Jasper and Horace remain close to her, continuing their unusual partnership as Cruella's trusted companions. Their relationship has changed because Cruella has changed. She still has a sharp temper and an unpredictable personality, but she has learned that completely abandoning the people who care about her would leave her just as lonely as the Baroness. Jasper especially becomes someone who can challenge Cruella when she becomes too reckless. He understands her ambitions but also remembers the innocent girl she once was, giving him a unique perspective that prevents Cruella from completely losing herself. Meanwhile, Cruella continues thinking about her mother. Catherine's death was the event that shaped nearly every decision she made, and now that the truth about the Baroness has been revealed, Cruella can finally look at her childhood differently. She understands that Catherine never wanted her daughter to become weak. She wanted Estella to survive in a world where powerful people could destroy anyone who stood in their way. Catherine's final sacrifice gave Estella the opportunity to grow up surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her, and Cruella slowly begins accepting that her mother's love was stronger than the Baroness' blood connection. Cruella also realizes that she does not need to completely erase Estella to become successful. Estella gave her creativity, intelligence, compassion, and the ability to understand people, while Cruella gave her courage, confidence, and the determination to fight back. Instead of seeing these sides of herself as enemies, she begins using both. This makes her more dangerous and more capable than before, because she can understand how people think while also knowing how to manipulate situations. Her greatest strength is no longer simply her talent for fashion. It is her ability to transform herself whenever the situation demands it. As her reputation grows, Cruella becomes increasingly fascinated with creating a legend around herself. She understands that fashion is not only about clothing, it is about creating an image that people remember. Every dress, hairstyle, entrance, and public appearance becomes part of the Cruella identity. She knows that people may forget individual designs, but they will never forget someone who makes them feel something. That is why she constantly pushes herself to become more dramatic, more unpredictable, and more unforgettable than anyone else in London. At the same time, the story quietly connects Cruella's future to the world of the original villain. The Dalmatian dogs remain an important symbol throughout her journey. Cruella has complicated feelings toward them, because they remind her of the night Catherine died. The dogs were involved in the tragedy, but Cruella also knows that they were acting under the control of their owner. Her anger is really directed toward the Baroness, yet the image of the Dalmatians remains permanently connected to her memories. This connection hints at the darker reputation she will eventually develop. Cruella's success also gives her access to a completely different level of society. She begins attending major events where wealthy people, celebrities, designers, and powerful business figures gather. Unlike the old Estella, who once felt uncomfortable around these people, Cruella knows exactly how to command their attention. She enters rooms as if they belong to her, speaks without fear, and refuses to let anyone intimidate her. Her confidence becomes one of the most recognizable aspects of her personality, and soon people begin talking about Cruella even when she is not present. However, beneath all the glamour, Cruella still carries a dangerous obsession with control. She has spent her entire life being controlled by other people, first by circumstances, then by poverty, and finally by the Baroness. Now that she has power of her own, she becomes determined never to be powerless again. This makes her extremely successful, but it also creates the possibility that she could someday become more like the Baroness than she wants to admit. Cruella understands this danger, but she believes she is strong enough to remain in control. The story finally brings Cruella's transformation full circle. The frightened child who once believed she was responsible for her mother's death has disappeared. In her place stands a confident woman who has accepted her unusual appearance, her complicated personality, and her ambition. She no longer asks permission to exist. She creates her own opportunities and forces the world to pay attention. But the future still holds many surprises, and the connection between Cruella and the Dalmatians suggests that her journey toward becoming the legendary villain is not completely finished. Her victory over the Baroness gave her freedom, but it also opened the door to a new chapter. Cruella now has everything she needs to become one of London's most powerful fashion figures. Yet the woman who once fought simply to survive is about to discover that fame and power bring their own dangers. The world may admire Cruella today, but the question remains whether it will eventually learn to fear her. Cruella has finally reached the position she always dreamed about, but her success comes with a new responsibility. She is no longer fighting for survival or trying to prove herself to the Baroness. Now she has to protect everything she has built. Her fashion house becomes one of the most talked about places in London, and people are fascinated by her unusual style, fearless attitude, and ability to turn every public appearance into a spectacle. Cruella understands that attention is power, and she knows exactly how to use that power to keep herself at the center of London's fashion world. Jasper and Horace become an important part of this new life. Although they continue to struggle with Cruella's unpredictable behavior. They have seen both sides of her personality and know that she can be incredibly loyal one moment and completely ruthless the next. Cruella appreciates their loyalty more than she openly admits. She knows that without them, she might never have survived her childhood or reached this position. Even though she rarely expresses her emotions directly, her actions show that she considers them part of her family. Cruella also keeps the memory of Catherine alive in her own way. She no longer sees her mother's death only as a tragedy that destroyed her childhood. Instead, she sees it as the event that forced her to discover who she really was. Catherine taught her to be brave, to protect herself, and to never allow cruel people to control her. Although Cruella has become far more aggressive than Catherine ever wanted, some of her mother's lessons remain inside her. This is why Cruella refuses to become exactly like the Baroness. She may enjoy power, but she does not want to spend her entire life destroying the people who care about her. The Baroness's downfall also leaves Cruella with a strange feeling of emptiness. For so long, revenge was the goal that gave her life direction. Every design, every scheme, and every confrontation had been connected to defeating the woman who caused her mother's death. Now that the Baroness is gone from her life, Cruella has to decide what she wants next. She realizes that revenge alone cannot define her forever. If she continues living only to punish the people who hurt her, then the Baroness will still control her life even from prison. Cruella therefore decides to focus on creating something that belongs entirely to her. Her fashion becomes more than a career. It becomes a form of self-expression and a declaration of independence. Every collection tells the world that Cruella refuses to be ordinary. She combines elegance with rebellion, beauty with darkness, and traditional fashion with shocking ideas. The result is a style that cannot easily be copied. London begins to understand that Cruella is not simply another designer looking for success. She is creating a personality around her brand, turning herself into a living symbol of freedom and defiance. At the same time, Cruella's reputation begins spreading beyond the people who know her personally. Some admire her creativity, while others are frightened by her intensity. She becomes the kind of person people discuss even when she is not in the room. That is exactly what she wants. She understands that legends are created through mystery, and she carefully protects the idea that nobody can completely predict what she will do next. This reputation gives her enormous influence, but it also creates the foundation for the darker reputation she will eventually carry. The connection to the Dalmatians becomes increasingly important as Cruella's story moves toward the future. The dogs remind her of the Baroness and the terrible night when Catherine died, but they also become part of the strange legacy connecting her to the events that will happen later. Cruella's relationship with the animals is complicated, and she never forgets what happened in her childhood. However, the movie makes it clear that her hatred is rooted in the trauma caused by the Baroness rather than a simple desire to hurt animals. Her future reputation will eventually become much darker than the person we see here. Cruella also begins accepting that her name is no longer just an alter ego. Estella was the identity created by Catherine, the girl who wanted to be accepted and loved. Cruella is the identity she created for herself, the woman who refuses to be controlled. By this point, the two identities have become one. She is still capable of friendship and loyalty, but she also embraces the darker side that once frightened her. Instead of trying to destroy that side, she learns to control it and use it when necessary. In the end, Cruella stands at the beginning of a new life. She has defeated the woman who destroyed her family, built her own fashion empire, repaired her relationship with her closest friends, and transformed herself from an unknown girl into a powerful figure. Yet the audience knows that the woman we are watching is only one stage of the character's larger story. The future will eventually connect her to another famous chapter involving Dalmatians, wealthy families, and a very different kind of conflict. Cruella has escaped her past, but she has also created a legend that will follow her for the rest of her life. Cruella's journey finally reaches the point where Estella and Cruella become one identity. The frightened girl who once believed that her mother's death was her fault has disappeared, replaced by a woman who understands her own strength and refuses to let anyone control her again. She has defeated the Baroness, uncovered the truth about her birth, and created a new life through her talent and determination. But the most important victory is not her success in fashion or her revenge against the Baroness. It is the fact that she has finally stopped blaming herself for everything that happened to her. Cruella now understands that Catherine's love was real, and that her mother sacrificed herself to protect her. For years Estella carried guilt because she believed her rebellious behavior had somehow caused the tragedy. But the truth shows that Catherine was trying to save her daughter from the Baroness and the dangerous world surrounding her. This realization allows Cruella to finally let go of the guilt that controlled her childhood. She keeps Catherine's memory close, but she no longer allows that painful night to determine who she is. Jasper, Horace, and Artie remain beside her as she moves forward. They are not simply employees or partners. They are the people who helped her survive when she had nothing. The necklace had been so important. Suddenly, Estella realizes that the woman she has been fighting all this time is not just her enemy. She is the person who gave her life and then abandoned her. But the revelation does not make Estella forgive the Baroness. Instead, it makes her anger even stronger. She begins thinking about everything that happened to Catherine and realizes that her mother died because she was connected to the Baroness's dark past. The Baroness had spent years believing she could control everyone around her, but now her own daughter has returned to challenge her. Estella decides that she will no longer hide behind her old identity. She fully embraces Cruella, turning herself into the woman the Baroness fears most. However, Cruella does not yet understand that the Baroness has her own suspicions, and the closer the two women get to the truth, the more dangerous their battle becomes. What began as a fashion rivalry is now a personal war between a mother and daughter who are both determined to destroy each other. After discovering that the Baroness is her biological mother, Estella feels as if everything she believed about her life has been turned upside down. Catherine, the woman she loved and remembered as her mother, had protected her from the truth for years, while the Baroness had continued living as though Estella had never existed. Instead of feeling relieved to finally know where she came from, Estella becomes even more determined to destroy the woman responsible for so much pain. She realizes that the Baroness did not simply abandon her. She also created the circumstances that led to Catherine's death. For Estella, this is no longer about becoming the most successful designer in London. It is about making the Baroness experience the same fear and helplessness that she has felt for years. Cruella begins planning her most ambitious attack yet. She knows that defeating the Baroness through fashion alone will never be enough, because the Baroness, who once blamed herself for her mother's death, is finally gone. In her place stands Cruella, a woman who has accepted every part of herself: her intelligence, her ambition, her anger, and her darkness. But unlike the Baroness, Cruella now has a choice. She can use her power to become exactly like the woman who destroyed her childhood, or she can create her own identity. The Baroness still believes that Cruella's story has ended, but she has no idea that the biggest surprise is still waiting for her. The final move will not simply expose the Baroness's crimes. It will completely change the future of Cruella, Jasper, Horace, and everyone who has been caught in their war. The Baroness believes that Cruella is dead, but her confidence quickly turns into confusion when the people around her begin behaving strangely. She has spent years controlling everyone through fear, money, and influence, so she cannot imagine that anyone could challenge her after what happened at the cliff. Meanwhile, Cruella's allies are secretly carrying out the plan she prepared before the confrontation. Jasper and Horace discover that her apparent death was part of a larger strategy, and although they are angry about the risks she took, they realize that Cruella has finally found a way to expose the Baroness without giving her another opportunity to escape. Cruella returns to the Baroness's estate at exactly the right moment, but this time she is no longer trying to hide her identity. She arrives dressed in a completely different style, showing that she has accepted the name Cruella permanently. The Baroness is shocked to see her alive and immediately realizes that she has been manipulated. Cruella explains that she knew the Baroness would eventually try to eliminate her, so she prepared everything in advance. The Baroness's greatest mistake was believing it came from refusing to follow the rules that everyone else accepted. Jasper and Horace remain close to her, continuing their unusual partnership as Cruella's trusted companions. Their relationship has changed because Cruella has changed. She still has a sharp temper and an unpredictable personality, but she has learned that completely abandoning the people who care about her would leave her just as lonely as the Baroness. Jasper especially becomes someone who can challenge Cruella when she becomes too reckless. He understands her ambitions, but also remembers the innocent girl she once was, giving him a unique perspective that prevents Cruella from completely losing herself. Meanwhile, Cruella continues thinking about her mother. Catherine's death was the event that shaped nearly every decision she made, and now that the truth about the Baroness has been revealed, Cruella can finally look at her childhood differently. She understands that Catherine never wanted her daughter to become weak. She wanted Estella to survive in a world where powerful people could destroy anyone who stood in their way. Catherine's final sacrifice gave Estella the opportunity to grow up surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her, and Cruella slowly begins accepting that her mother's love was stronger than the Baroness' blood connection. Cruella also realizes that she does not need to completely erase Estella to become successful. Estella gave her creativity, intelligence, compassion, and the ability to understand people, while Cruella gave her courage, confidence, and the determination to fight back. Instead of seeing these sides of herself as enemies, she begins using both. This makes her more dangerous and more capable than before, because she can understand how people think while also knowing how to manipulate situations. Her greatest strength is no longer simply her talent for fashion. It is her ability to transform herself whenever the situation demands it. As her reputation grows, Cruella becomes increasingly fascinated with creating a legend around herself. Cruella has learned an important lesson from them. Power may help her defeat enemies, but loyalty is what gives her life meaning. She may still be unpredictable, dramatic, and ruthless when necessary, But she now understands that she does not have to face every battle alone. Her closest friends accept both sides of her personality, and Cruella finally accepts that she can be powerful without completely destroying the people she loves. The Baroness, meanwhile, has lost the control she once believed was permanent. Her crimes and manipulation have been exposed, and she is finally forced to face the consequences of her actions. She spent her entire life believing that weakness was something to be eliminated, and that people existed to serve her ambitions. In the end, that philosophy leaves her with nothing. Cruella defeats her not by becoming a copy of her, but by proving that the Baroness's obsession with control was ultimately her greatest weakness. Cruella then looks toward the future with complete confidence. She has her own fashion empire, her own identity, and a reputation that continues to grow. She no longer needs the Baroness's approval or anyone else's permission to succeed. Her clothing becomes a reflection of everything she has experienced: her childhood, her loss, her anger, her creativity, and her desire for freedom. London may not always understand her, but it cannot ignore her. Cruella has turned herself into a name that people will remember. The movie also leaves an important connection to the classic story of Cruella de Vil. The Dalmatians that were connected to Estella's childhood remain part of her world, creating a bridge between this origin story and the character audiences already know. The movie shows that Cruella was not simply born as a heartless villain. Her personality was shaped by years of hardship, ambition, betrayal, and the need to survive. She made choices that pushed her toward darkness, but she also maintained relationships and emotions that separated her from the Baroness. Ultimately, Cruella is a story about identity and transformation. Estella spends most of her life trying to understand why she feels different from everyone else. She eventually realizes that being different is not something she needs to hide. Her unusual appearance, creative mind, rebellious personality, and darker instincts all become parts of the woman she chooses to become. Instead of allowing other people to define her, she creates her own identity and turns her greatest weaknesses into strengths. The story also shows how revenge can change a person. Cruella begins her journey wanting answers about her mother's death, but as she gets closer to the truth, revenge consumes more and more of her life. She pushes away people who love her and becomes willing to take dangerous risks. Eventually, she realizes that defeating the Baroness is not enough. She has to decide what kind of person she wants to be after the revenge is over. That decision becomes the real conclusion of her transformation. By the end, Cruella has survived the tragedy that once defined her, defeated the woman who caused it, and created a future entirely under her own control. She is no longer Estella, hiding behind someone else's expectations. She is Cruella, confident, ambitious, unpredictable, and completely determined to leave her mark on the world. Her journey does not end here, because the legend of Cruella de Vil will eventually become much darker. But this story explains how that legend began. And that is what makes Cruella so interesting. Instead of showing us a villain who simply chooses evil, the movie shows us a young woman shaped by loss, betrayal, creativity, and ambition. She becomes someone capable of both loyalty and ruthlessness, love and revenge, elegance and chaos. Estella may have disappeared, but everything she experienced remains inside Cruella. Her past created her choices transformed her, and her future will turn her into the infamous character the world will eventually come to fear.